scream, but a gloved hand closed around her mouth. The killer pressed the tip of the stiletto against the base of her skull and, with one smooth upward movement, pushed the blade in as far as the hilt. 10 minutes later there was a hammering at the door. Seconds after that, the door smashed open on its hinges, and a dozen armed men in protective vests and helmets streamed into the hallway. By the time FBI Special Agent Clarence Bryson entered the apartment, it had been cleared and locked down, and one of the armed men was standing guard over the dead woman and a cat lying in the kitchen. Chapter 2. The two men had dined that night at an Algerian cafe just off Government Square in Mombasa Old Town, near enough to the Dhow harbour to hear the shouts of the stevedores unloading sacks of sorghum from the night freighters, but far enough from it to escape the stink of rotting fish and sunboil. And later, much later, they would reflect that, until Lol Quarry plummeted 100 feet from the ramparts of Fort Jesus and landed at their feet with a sound like breaking eggs, it had been a most convivial evening. Detective Inspector Daniel Jouma, as befitted a man with the wiry build of a jockey and the abstemiousness of a saint, chose a small dish of chickpeas and a pot of mint tea. Jake Moore, 6 foot tall and with the appetite of a horse, ordered a slab of bloody steak and a schooner of ice-cold Tusker beer. They sat at a table by the open doorway and talked and laughed, and occasionally, lost in thought, gazed up at the glow of the city lights reflected on the high scudding cloud and wondered just how a 51-year-old Kenyan policeman and an English fishing boat skipper 15 years his junior should have ended up as friends. A month ago, they had never met. Jake was an ex-flying squad cop whose dreams of running a charter business were sinking faster than a lead marlin weight. Jouma, meanwhile, had reached the conclusion that his 30 years in Kenya police had been a waste of time, and that the country of his birth was deservedly going to hell. Then a 30-foot fishing boat called Martha B had blown up 6 miles off the coast, along with its skipper Dennis Bentley, and Jake and Jouma had been plunged into a deadly game of cat and mouse with an organization whose trade was human lives. Patrick Noonan, the man who had controlled the organization's East African supply network, had died in the blades of a 500-horsepower outboard motor after desperate struggle with Jake, and was buried in an unmarked grave because nobody knew who he actually was, not even the woman who had once been his lover. "Have you heard from Martha since she returned to New York?" Jouma asked as the cafe proprietor cleared the plates with a peevish glance at the half-eaten chickpeas. Jake lit a cigarette and ordered a glass of buka, a potent Algerian fig brandy. "I expect she's got more important things to think about," he said. Martha Bentley clearly meant a lot to the Englishman, certainly more than the money she planned to invest in his ailing business. Her return to New York, where she worked as a high-flying lawyer, was only temporary, while she sorted her dead father's affairs and finalized the transfer of his insurance money. But while Jake was a man who did not show his feelings, Jouma could sense that he missed her more than he would ever admit. They paid and walked along Mbaraki Road in the direction of the 16th century fort. Lights were burning in the shops and cafes, and the thick night air was laden with the smell of strong coffee and hookah smoke. "How was life under the new regime at Mama Ngina Drive?" Jake asked. "Superintendent Sima has yet to show her colours." "Or her clothes?" Jouma frowned. "I'm of the opinion that anyone will be an improvement on Superintendent Teshete." "I hope so, Inspector, for your sake." So did Jouma. Having put one corrupt boss behind bars, he had no desire to go through the process again. They had arrived at the hulking stucco walls of Fort Jesus. It was 7 o'clock in the evening. By the entrance were a line of hawkers selling trinkets, and nearby all men were playing kaluki beneath the cashew trees. It was such an utterly mundane scene that what happened next seemed all the more unreal. Jake saw the body out of the corner of his eye. With one hand he grabbed Jouma by the arm and yanked him clear. It was an instinctive reflex, and one which most probably saved the small Mombasa detective's life, because Lol Quarry weighed in excess of 16 stone and would have crushed